like to call the meeting of the Board of Directors to order. We are at Monday, November 5th, and this is our work. First, a move to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
That was from Brian, and a second from Debbie. So as we move into the agenda, we're going to move one item up in the agenda, and we're going to go into executive session to discuss it. So we have the attorney that we'll be talking with. This will not then be recorded. We will resume, we're estimating about a half hour. Maybe a little earlier, maybe a little longer, but estimating about a half hour. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, just a little bit more background for those watching at home. President has the authority to call executive session if something has come up with either legal or personnel. And what's happening is President's going to call an executive session for legal to discuss some issues with the attorney, and the attorney's on the phone right now.
Okay, so thank you, Steve, for the clarification. So we'll now go into executive session, and then we'll invite our audience back in shortly. Thank you all. Thank you for your understanding. Thank you, Patrick.
Patrick's shutting it down, right?
It's too early. You can't object, we haven't done anything yet.
Okay, we're going to resume. Thank you for indulging us with the executive session. We're going to do some quick updates, and we want to make sure that these are quick, because we have a lot to cover with the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Interlocal agreement, any update?
I did not hear back from the county on Friday, which was the time frame that they gave me last week, so when we're done with this meeting today, I'm gonna call and insist on a meeting this week, so that we can talk about the interlocal agreement, and O'Brien had asked about the DRI and impact fee, so I'll try and combine both into one meeting this week.
I think we need to actually have a meeting.
Yeah, and if we need to go have another face-to-face, we can do that.
I'll bring the
Yeah,
same
we
group
just,
that came last
we
time.
just need to move on this. It has to be finalized by the board and publicized to the community before we would vote on it. Website revisions. I know there was an update at the last workshop. What's the update today?
Still
New
business
website.
Business as usual. We provided them with pretty much the hierarchy, the architecture of what the website's going to be, menus and some of the functionality that we're looking for. And so they're populating everything now so that they can get that first look and feel of the website. There's not much of an update beyond that.
One of the pieces that we had talked to with about 5 months ago, I think, was Kevin and I would have the first look prior to the board to give you feedback, so that before we engage the entire board, and then we engage the community. So any timeline on when that might be?
I will get back to you.
Okay.
As soon as we have that first draft, I'll let you know.
I know that early on, we had talked about going live in November with the community. I guess that's
Oh, I was always January. January 1st.
early on, it was November.
Realistic,
Early on.
realistic deadlines.
New realistic deadline.
Okay. So moving,
We're moving
Quickly.
right along, and
Yeah.
we really want to make sure that we have a good website that works, everybody's on board with it. and,
absolutely. Okay,
So I'd hate to rush
okay.
something.
And let me just ask, there won't be any way to use that website to get at individual homeowner financial information, or, and I'm asking in terms of hacking and
No.
the potential, there's nothing to
There's-
hack out of that
there's-
website, correct?
They're not on the same network, they're not tied to anything, they're
Not
not
linked
in
to
any
any
way
CCMC
linked.
database, any CCMC record keeping, there will be
No.
none of that kind of functionality.
Absolutely not.
And that's a good question. Do we have any
Thank you.
protection on that area? CCMC has that protection?
Yeah, the insurance protection was.
No, as far as in hacking into the site for homeowner information, is that?
I think that we have part of our policy, a cyber coverage, and then I sent to the board last week what entire coverage that is part of the CCMC contract.
I think what Debbie might be asking
Yeah,
is,
I'm
do
asking
you
something
have actual
Firewall.
firewalls built to protect data?
Yeah.
Not insurance, but is it
Before it
reasonably
happens.
secure?
Yeah.
Yes, CCMC does.
Which is a whole separate website than the website.
Yeah, and if we want to make that part of a little bit more in-depth conversation, when Brian and Susan are in Arizona, certainly.
Yeah,
have
that's
our
worth, I
IT
think that's worth that
director follow
agenda
up.
for the Arizona trip. County dumpster ordinance proposal, any update?
Actually, I got something from Steve Fraunfelder that I'll send out to each one of you for your comments.
Okay, so that's moving forward. We'll soon
Well, I
finalize
haven't
it.
seen any comments from any of the other board members either. I know that we.
I had one comment that I brought in, I'll just give it to you. or-
That's fine, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
If you want to email it to me also.
And then the final step on that, once we have,
Are we tying, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Are we tying that in any way to the interlocal agreement? That is, since this is something that would ultimately go back to the county, are we in any way trying to link up getting funds from the county for the interlocal with moving forward? Are they asking us for this dumpster agreement?
No.
Okay, so they're two completely separate items.
totally separate.
Please, keep them totally 100% separate, get the cash.
Get the-
That's why I'm asking. I just want to make sure that they're
Cash
not
the
saying
check.
we want this dumpster.
Just to reiterate though what I said at the board meeting last Monday, the email that I got was that Beth Ann is working, progress is being made, she's working on the language of the interlocal agreement. I just didn't hear back from them by Friday on where they are with that progress, so that's why I'll insist.
You know, I've just got my skeptical lawyer
I know.
hat on that just makes me nervous about this stuff.
Technology Committee resolution, I know that was on the agenda for the last workshop, but
I have a
wasn't
meeting
Okay.
with Susan afterwards.
Okay, good.
Then go.
So we'll have a draft, and maybe we can discuss that more at the next workshop?
Exactly.
It won't be ready for the board meeting, per se.
It might be, depending on today.
What, depends when the packet, which is 2 items later.
It'll go out Thursday.
Okay, okay. Charter review update, any further discussion? Just, I want to keep it
At
alive.
the last meeting, we talked
Right.
about it. We said we'll need a charter revision task force.
Okay.
And I forget who was going to take the lead on that. Does anybody remember?
I looked at the tape. Don't remember.
I don't think
I
maybe
don't know that we
talked
resolved
about
that.
I don't think we resolved that.
And I know that
I think you talked
Susan's,
about a timeframe too, of really beginning with the new board members.
Yeah,
coming on
so it
board.
may be that we just, yeah.
want to just wait until the new board, till March?
But what Susan and I can do is just get in touch with Tom and talk to him about what the process looks like as we go through that charter review. I think it's gonna mostly be the work by our task force.
Do we begin the framework, just because I wouldn't want to lose, I think we have the benefit of having
Agreed.
2 or 3 additional voices that know this board and know different things that maybe the board that stay don't realize or see. So I'd like to at least hear the thoughts and possibly have a conversation about that charter review.
So
prior to
let's
changeover.
workshop that maybe in January.
January.
Yeah.
What some of those issues might be. I know Susan has a jump start of a list that we keep pointing to. Susan,
Yes, but
so why don't we talk about that in January, so that we have some insights? Reserve study, insurance appraisal, any update on those?
Oh, yes, you'll see the insurance appraisal, I believe it's $7,600 or $7,800 on the agenda for this coming board meeting.
Right.
And the insurance appraisal hasn't been done since 2011, and we've added the dog park, and I anticipate in April that the athletic fields will be updated. So I think it's really important that we capture all of our assets and make sure that they're properly insured. And the insurance appraisal will tell us what they're worth.
So they're going to anticipate what the athletic complex
It
would
will
be?
be
It'll be
virtually complete at that point in time, in April of 2019.
We have the plans too that we'll be able to utilize for the appraisal.
And I was also going to say, the other part to that is, in order to get it timed properly for us, we have to execute the contracts. It won't happen until the end of April. The week of April 29th is what I picked for our convenience and to make sure that we have it in time for budgeting, because it usually takes a couple of months to get it nailed down.
Any more discussion on insurance that we need at this point?
No, we'll just come forward with a proposal for the board meeting.
Okay. November board meeting, I know that the October meeting was delayed and the November meeting is early, so we have a quicker timeline in terms of turnaround. Can you just share with us a timeline when we look for the board packet and when you want feedback?
You should have the board packet by next Thursday. Feedback.
A week from this, 4 days?
Coming Thursday.
3 days from now.
Because the next week is the board meeting.
Yeah, so Thursday is the 8th, you'll receive your board packets. Next Wednesday, the 14th, is the board meeting.
And so historically, it's been on the Monday
Okay.
that we've gotten.
So feedback by Monday.
But let's also, if we got something like the financials where we know there's no change from the prior month, let's just not, we can put the materials in there, but let's not even have it on the agenda. I mean, we don't need to
It's fine.
spend time.
Thank you, Brian, you brought it. I don't know for certain that the financials will be in there. We're making every effort to have them in there, but it's about a week earlier than
Yeah,
normal.
yeah.
And then Lou Byron's gonna try and have the insurance breakdown to us on Thursday, but he won't have it until the 7th, because 30 days out are when the insurance companies will quote it. So he'll have to put it together. So that may come on Friday under separate cover.
Okay. And just in that light, I've already drafted the December, the board article for the Celebration News for December. You'll see that later this afternoon. I have to re-edit what I wrote, so you'll see that later for a quick turnaround. JR has to have it by noon Thursday finalized. So I'll give you the article today.
Could I ask two
Please.
quick
Yeah, please.
update questions?
Please, other updates.
The service area letter from Susanna to the 3 service areas. Has that letter been approved to send out? Has it gone
I'm
out?
gonna add that right now.
It went out on Friday.
Okay, and, thank you, I appreciate that. And the second question is, having to do with Comcast. We had proposed a meeting with the condo representatives, and then it looked like maybe we weren't going to do it, and then we received some information this morning that might change that once again. I'd like to request that we invite all of the condo associations back together again sometime in the next 10 days to 2 weeks to facilitate a discussion of where we are, unless there's disagreement from the board.
And we had already decided as a board to have a regular gathering, if you will, of condo associations.
Right.
But this is more targeted about the Comcast discussion.
The information I received this morning is unverified at this hour, so I don't know what that means, and
Can we get Amy to verify that for us?
I haven't done anything, I just received
Can
an
we
email.
though?
We
I
walked
mean,
in this
she'd be the
morning.
one, right?
I can, I just had a conversation with her on my ride in this morning, and that was not
She did
mentioned
not hear
at
that.
all.
Okay.
So I'll get
And
back
who was
to
that from, Jackson?
It really seems like 2 weeks is too long. If the information you got is true, then we need to know if it's true today, and then condos have to have a chance to then adjust strategy almost immediately.
Well, I would be happy to meet this week if we can pull it off. I need to get out of this meeting and go make some phone calls and see what I can find out. I know Steve's gonna do the same thing. And I don't, because we're public here, I don't wanna say something that's not true. I can only say that we've got some information that makes us concerned about what Comcast is doing with condominiums, if that's fair enough.
Understand, fair. So we would convene a meeting of condo owners slash, condo managers slash boards.
I had originally had the meeting scheduled for November the 5th. I have canceled it as of last week.
That's today.
That's today's the 5th.
Oh, the 9th, yeah, Friday, the 9th, that's exactly.
Could we try again for the 9th?
Once you try,
Yes, we can try and get it back.
yeah, pending Jackson's further review. One last thing, at least, I have one last thing. Celebration News, there was a glitch last week. We all got, or many of us got the Friday, or the flash, the email from print to order, or from you. You want to share any more, or print to order? I see that someone with a print to order shirt is in the audience. I assume that's a representative from print to order.
From Las Vegas.
Yes, so any questions you have, I'd like to introduce this is Sean Schofield, representing the publisher. Hopefully can answer some of your questions.
Why don't you just give us the status?
Yeah, so the status is we had a small hiccup with the printing aspect of it. Status is that the magazine will be here in town. I'm staying here until it shows up this week. We're expecting it tomorrow or Wednesday, and in mailboxes hopefully by Friday. That I can't guarantee due to postal. Once we drop at the post office, they have their time to deliver that. But we're hoping with coming out of political season that the post office will be back on schedule. There has been, as anybody has seen in your mailboxes, an enormous amount of mail. So we're not expecting a delay in it actually arriving in mailboxes any further than what we are today.
Can you go over what the hiccup was and what you've done to
Sure.
prevent that in the future? Because I don't know that we've ever been this late.
So neither have we. We have a lot of publications, and I am the publisher. I take it very seriously that we get our product out and the community product out into the community on time every month. This is the latest I've ever been as well. This was an unprecedented time of year with the way that the political season was running, with the amount of print that came into the industry from East Coast to West Coast. We were assured, we actually used a trade partner on this first printing due to the location of Celebration and to expedite the shipping of it because we had such a short period of time to turn the entire publication from the time that the board approved this. It's a huge undertaking, and thanks to JR and everyone that worked with him, we got to that point. What we were unable to control is that the trade partner that we used to print this edition had, they had assured us that we wouldn't have any issues because they have 3 presses. The press that we were on went down, and when that went down, that created a certain, just a waterfall of events that slowed the whole process up.
Sean, right?
Yes, yes.
I say this with all due respect. Everything you've just said is an excuse that I don't care about.
I
I'm
understand.
going to be very firm with this one.
I understand.
I put my neck out for your company and for this publication.
Right.
If there is a delay in getting information to you, you would be upset and use that back to us. An election season is nothing new. You are a printer. You have a material that you get out to us.
Right.
If you felt as though this was not the best timing, we could have put it off a month or 2 until you were ready.
We
and
had
not use a
we
trade
had no
partner.
idea. We honestly didn't, and it was.
I know, but you're the professional in this.
No, I understand that. We've never, in the 15 years I've been doing this, we've never in the industry seen anything like this, ever. But regardless, all that I can say is that the publication is coming. I can give you a list of references. We've never been late, ever. This is a huge thing. I have been working around the clock. We have tried. We even went to other printers trying to see if we could solve this situation due to the way that our industry works. It was impossible. Understand, I know that everybody's excited to have the magazine here, as are we. We've had great feedback from the advertisers. We've had great feedback from the community in the piece that went out. I think that everyone is going to be, this is going to be a one-time situation that we will look back on and understand that it happened and there's nothing we can do about it today.
Now, you
So
flew
I
in from
understand.
Vegas.
I
Did you
did.
take a copy with you by chance? Did you print just one? Do you have
No,
anything? You have.
I did not bring a copy with me because I'm bringing the copies here. I'll be driving them in.
Where's
You're
it being
driving.
printed out of?
They're not putting them in Vegas.
We're not printing them in
Florida.
Vegas. We're printing them in Florida,
Right. Where is it physically being printed?
out of Miami.
Out of Miami?
And you're picking them up and driving them up here.
Yes.
Okay, so if this is a one-time occurrence in 15 years and you don't expect it to happen again, is there anything we can do to amend the contract for any type of assurance?
We have in the contract, it says by the 5th of the month. This is the first edition. And in that process, the first edition is always a little bit chaotic. And to be understood that it is a little bit chaotic. This was the hiccup. We thought we hit the number. We hit the deadline, we hit everything, had thought we're going to be heroes to be able to have this into the community by the 1st.
JR, when did you get the content to print to order?
Probably would be the October 10th.
When did you submit it for printing?
It was on the Friday of the, I would have to, let me look at the calendar.
Have you used this third party before?
This particular one, no. But we vetted them. We vetted them and we had no concerns. Our industry is loaded, they're trade printers, right?
Are you
They're
a
not-
printer or are you a middleman?
We're a printer. We're a full-service printer.
Sean, when you found out that the printers went down, did you contact other printers to try and
Yes.
switch it to a different printer?
Yes, we did, and that's one of the processes that we do, and every printer does, because we all have machines that go down. And so, we all work together in the trade, to pass things along. Nobody could take on the work. Understand that it was unprecedented what we have seen in this political season, and everybody was backed up. And had not foreseen that being an issue here.
Can you also talk real quickly, Sean, about working with the transition of all of the advertisers
Sure.
to the magazines and newspaper, including some of the smaller size advertisers?
Hold on
and-
just a moment. I just want to finish up this delay. I'm sorry. You said it was Friday the what?
I hadn't gotten to that one
Okay,
yet.
let's double check that really quick.
Okay.
Just to be curious. And has it been printed already and it's in Miami?
Yes, it is printed. It's in bindery right now. So we're perfect binding the magazine because one of the things that we take a lot of pride in ourselves is the quality and the presentation of the piece. This is a beautiful magazine. something that's going to reflect the community very well. And it is a huge investment on our part as doing this, because we believe in the product and we believe in the community, and are honored to be able to be the publisher and printer, to be able to do all that and put that together. And so understand that it's not a saddle stitch. It's not something, it is a professional magazine.
Right now, it's nothing. Right now, there's nothing.
I understand.
So,
that was on the 20, and I just want to make sure that I'm looking at the correct calendar here. Yes, it was the 26th.
26th. How long does it typically take to produce a magazine? Because I know your cutoff is the 7th, right? Final review is the 15th by CROA. So when would you typically, if you received final approval on the 15th of a month, when would you submit it for printing?
So typically we would submit sooner than that. So we can go through the process here. So we had a lot of advertisers that did not get back to us. We had a lot of advertisers that were not coming back to us with their artwork. And so what we were doing is constantly trying to get them to be in, because there's a process here. Remember, we're all on the same team here. I'm not.
Yeah, let me pause that really quick, because I'm trying to understand the full thing. So you got everything off to him on the 10th. Final approval came in.
Then there's about a week worth of proofing too. It was three editions that we proved.
So about the 17th, do we think?
I know I was proofing the day before Fall Fest, so that would have been the 19th.
Those, okay. And then, so all advertising final edition was approved by the 19th?
No.
So that's what I want to understand then, okay.
That's not the content was.
Okay.
Now we're still dealing with advertisers. So with those advertisers, we're trying to get them converted. Now, what we did is we took all of the advertisers and we offered them any of our resources to give them conversion from the size of ad that they were running in the newspaper to the size of the ad into a magazine. So we worked with them, gave them all of the access to us and getting them into the magazine. One of the concerns was we could have cut when we got the approval. The concern was that if we cut, now we've just left a whole bunch of advertisers that have not gotten back to us. And understand, I was still, as of Sunday, on the 20, that would have been what, the 28th or 29th, I was still getting calls from advertisers saying, is there any way we can get in? And I'm like, there's not, we're already gone. It's done, it's on press, and that was where we were at. But I had stretched it out as far as I could for the sole purpose of trying to protect the community and the board from getting the phone calls of people saying, I didn't get it in the magazine, knowing we had tried everything we could to get those advertisers in there down to the final hour.
Let me just add to that too, real quick. I personally approve Sean trying to get these advertisers up to the last minute. So if there's any responsibility that needs to be taken for that, I will take that personally. But I felt it more important to get every advertiser in here that needed to get in for this first edition. And if it wasn't for the print press going down, we would have this magazine sitting in front of us. So
Brian, do you have
I see
anything?
no reason to not believe Sean that the printer went down. I think that for December, he has every opportunity to find 2, 3, 4 different vendors to make sure that if one does go down again, that there's a backup for it. And we fully expect that this would not happen again.
I guess, let me make 2 comments. I really think probably we made a mistake going with November 1. We probably should have went with December 1. That's hindsight. This weekend is Founder's Day weekend, which is a huge weekend in the community. And if your magazine is not sitting around everywhere, you will be famous. I just want to be very honest with you, because if it comes out next Tuesday with all the advertisements for Founder's Day weekend, this board will get skewered.
I had a one-way ticket to here. I don't have a ticket home, okay? Because I'm here to make sure, and I don't intend on driving it up myself personally, but if that's what it comes down to, that's what will be happening.
I think Thursday is critical.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, because this, you probably have heard some of the stories, this was a political hot banana.
Right.
And
you can imagine the pressure on from our side. It's not been taken lightly. I got the call on Friday afternoon to come out here. Here I am. I couldn't get a flight out Sunday that would get me here before this meeting today. I flew a red eye Saturday night at midnight. You know, I've done everything I can to make sure that, to make you as comfortable as possible, and know that I'm here to make sure that we perform and let you know that we're here for you.
Who do the advertisers contact? Who are they going through to get to you?
What's the team working with them?
They're calling.
Directly? They
Yes.
call you directly?
Yes.
Okay.
Not me personally.
I mean,
Yes,
the company.
They call us directly.
They don't go through town hall anymore,
No,
right?
they're completely outsourced now, the advertising going through Printful.
And you have a team, or is it just you talking with them, or is there a
No,
team?
there's a team. In the first
Yeah.
month, I, as the publisher, try to always create a direct contact with each advertiser in the transition.
How many did we lose, do you know?
About, I think there was like
Is there a
15.
percentage? 15?
15
Okay.
advertisers.
Is someone personally calling them to try to work with them for the next issue?
Yes, that's what we're
Okay,
doing.
and is there anything, any one particular thing that was the block on those, or?
There wasn't that there was any block on any of those. So we presented, most of your advertisers were very happy to stay on because they were going into a magazine. They were very excited about that. The idea of being able to be in something that would stick around longer than a newspaper made them, from an advertising standpoint, interested. The other thing is that because we guaranteed their rates for 12 months, you have to understand that some of those advertisers, a good portion of them, are coming in at below cost to produce.
Yeah, but they're also getting 3 weeks of advertising this month, so.
Yeah,
They
might get a
they're-
25% refund.
And so, and as an industry standard, that does fall within the industry standard, not our standard, but as an industry
Yeah, it's
standard.
not our
But-
standard.
And ours neither. The point being is that, to your question, yes, we're working at getting everybody back in. There wasn't any one reason other than either they didn't get back to us, they didn't return our calls, didn't return our emails, and even the ones that didn't, that have come back, are very eager to get back in as well. But there's just a few that didn't make it.
Are you extending that 12-month guarantee because of late publication? For how long?
I'm sorry, through the December edition. Yeah.
Through just the December issue? Could we go to January?
The-
I mean, being that we're having a transition issue, can we go to January? It's the holiday season, some people get busy.
Well, anybody that was a prior advertiser, listen, and understand something. We understand that the prior advertisers, they're why this publication exists, right? And so they are everything to us, as well as we understand their commitment to the community. And so from our standpoint is that they are equally as important as the community. So that we've got two parties that all have to come together, and us being the third, where we all work together towards the same goal of creating a beautiful publication that gets out on time, and working together and understanding that things happen with advertisers. I mean, we jump through hoops for our advertisers as well. I mean, you know, part of this transition is all about getting to know them and letting them know that we're here for them, and we appreciate their support and their ongoing support of the community as it has been.
Okay. So just to go back to the beginning, we should see some hard copies
You'll have hard
in
copies.
in the community Wednesday?
Wednesday, Thursday, yes.
Wednesday, Thursday.
So then we can immediately populate the various
Correct.
So
racks.
you're in town? You're in town?
I'm staying in town until.
You're gonna make a couple of requests, possibly.
Yeah.
One, if you can get that magazine here, I'd like to see if you can spend the time here. I don't wanna bog down our staff in getting that magazine out, but if the resident wants to get it, awesome. Two, if you're able to get some extra copies, so that way somebody might be getting them mailed to their house, but if they wanna pick it up sooner, that's possible for them. And three, feel free to come by on Saturday. You are more than welcome to, as long as everyone's okay, have a dish, and meet some of the owners. And when I'm there and I'm enjoying my barbecue, and I have comments regarding the paper, the magazine, I will be happy to go ahead and introduce you. So those are my three requests, if anyone else wants to chime in. That'd be a great place to have magazines.
Yeah. And if you're here for a couple days, I'm sure you're meeting with some of the advertisers that haven't converted yet. Maybe meet with them.
That was my intention.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Anything else on this?
One quick question. Stuff happens, things go wrong. This board struggled, and our previous board struggled with the decision to make the switch. That's why you're hearing the questions you're hearing. We have as board members, personally been assailed and attacked for making a decision. I think those of us, and as a board as a whole, all felt like this would be a good product. I still believe that. I'm anxious to see it. I think my only question to you is, what could we do as a board to assist you to produce the best product on time as we go forward?
I think that right now, just the understanding for this first edition is all that I'm asking for, because I've never had to ask a board for their understanding in the past. And so I think that I appreciate what it is that you've had to deal with to get to this point. And I know that it is a disappointment, and it is hard to, I don't want to be here for this reason. I want to be here because we're celebrating the product. And I appreciate your understanding to this point, and want you to know that this is not anything that you can look forward to in the future.
Where will the magazines be delivered to, and who distributes them around town?
They'll be delivered here at Town Hall, and then.
All of them?
Yes.
And then
Well, no,
who-
not the ones that are dropped at the post office, the overruns, the ones that we usually.
But the ones that go into the racks?
They'll be delivered here, and then they'll be distributed throughout town.
They go out?
So Town Hall delivers around town?
Our maintenance team,
And they'll do that the day they arrive? You'll do that the day they arrive?
yes.
And when they go to the post office, at the local post office or the Miami post office?
So it'll go to Miami and then ship up to local, but it normally takes, it's a 2 to 3 day process. So.
As soon as they get here, just let each board member get a copy, please, at least so we can look at them and be prepared for the weekend.
And I'm happy to, meet with you all again with hard copies. I know that I know that it has created tension, and I do apologize for that. It was never my intention. We knew it was a big undertaking. I knew what we were up against, and I just ask you for, a little bit of patience, and I understand that it's trying.
And Sean, Kevin brought up a very good point, from the advertiser's point of view. So it may not be in the mail till Monday or Tuesday, possibly, if it's not here till Thursday or Friday?
It possibly could be, but, that is possible, because I have no control, and no one does. No one in this room, no one has.
And I understand that, but the advertisers don't either, and they paid for a full 30 days for the month. Is there any compensation back to them or extension?
So no, there's not, because their contracts that they've signed actually have that, and they understand that there can be causes that can cause delays in the magazine showing up.
So they've signed something that we're not aware of, that they can just, if it
Correct.
comes or doesn't come, they still pay?
It's not whether it comes or doesn't come, it's a matter of when it's received, because again, advertising is a founded institution. I mean, it's been around for a long time. There are delays that happen and that are to be expected in the industry of advertising. There's sometimes where People Magazine is a week late getting out. That's covered in their contract for that. But our contracts are with the advertisers. We have those contracts directly with them. They've agreed to those terms, and we will make sure that they are taken care of.
So can we close this down?
I just want to add one more thing for those watching now or going to be watching later. If you want access to the content, it's available to you now through our website. And there was an email that went out on Thursday or Friday, I believe.
It was Thursday.
But had a direct link to the magazine.
To the
So the
magazine.
content's there. It's available for folks to read. And the hard copy will be here this week for them to have in their hands.
Yeah, but I mean, if I wanted to create a PowerPoint, we could have done it for a lot less money.
I just want to make
Okay.
sure that the residents are absolutely aware that the
Yeah.
content's available for them to look at right now.
All right, thank you. Let's move back to our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Obviously, we're not going to cover our full agenda. Can we spend just a little bit of time on CROA election standards, and then the rest of our time, Parks and Recreation Master Plan? And knowing we may be going overtime, is it okay with the board to go a tad over, maybe quarter of, and at the latest noon?
I'm happy to go over. I think I'd
Happy to
rather
go
get
over.
through the
Okay.
business. We're
So
busy.
business done.
let's deal quickly with CROA election standards. There were several things that came up over the last election cycle, at least. And we just want to talk about, is it what we need to be diligent with, what we can be proactive with. Some of these might be charter changes, so we can't deal with those today. We can just put them on our to-do list. But election standards and candidates review. So there's a,
You have a handout.
We have a
with
handout?
the postcard that we send out, as well as the call for candidates form that the candidates submit back to us.
So what
And
is the-
have historically.
what's the timeline for postcard going out? Candidate applications due, candidate applications due and finalized?
Last year, December 11th, the call for candidates went out. The deadline was January 15th. The polls opened on February the 5th, and the polls closed on March 6th.
When does the new website come online?
We're looking at the early part of January.
Will that change this? Is it going to still be the same www?
It'll be
It's the same address.
So they'll be able to find all the responsibilities?
It'll just be a new look and feel. But it'll be the same
Okay.
So, JR, with the deadline for the February 1 edition of Celebration News, when historically you have posted pictures and bios and statements of candidates, a January 15 deadline does not match with the deadline for Celebration News, am I correct? Because it's an earlier deadline.
15th would work.
It would work?
They'll be aware that it's coming.
Say that again?
The printer will be aware that it's coming.
Okay.
Pages will already be there.
So that still will work?
Oh,
Okay.
but let's move the dates up a little.
Let's make it the
work.
10th. Make it,
I mean,
don't
For
stress
future
yourself.
as well,
Sorry.
for
Huh?
future. Is that gonna be every year that it's going to be possible?
well,
Or
but why
Let's just
do we need a
do the 10th.
deadline, in all honesty, why do we need a deadline of January 15th? Why can't we have a deadline?
Make it,
So I'm saying, let's have
let's
a,
make it earlier. Make it
having
the
went
10th.
through this process myself, you end up making, people who are gonna run, make that decision relatively quickly. You get the bios and everything. Let's just move the dates up. Let's get this thing out right after Thanksgiving, the postcard. On the postcard, let's add a little bit about the key dates. Let's get the stuff back from the candidates by January 5th, and then when they all
Would that
miss
work
it by a
better?
week, at least we're in there. We get the bios in place and everything for the February voting, and then we have the month of voting.
Just for the awareness of the board, we have we pulled the team together that's, the management staff that have responsibility in the election, and we have a step-by-step process, documented process of what needs to be done, when it needs to be done. And it's usually that second week of November when we have that meeting. So we just have yet to have it. We will have it within the next week. We'll modify all the dates. We'll make sure that it meets the deadline so that it gets out on time.
is that what you're asking?
That's what I'm asking is maybe right after Thanksgiving, get the postcard out and give people a deadline. Pick the right date in early January to make sure we've got plenty of time.
Plenty of
Get
time
the
to
candidates in, get their bios, get it in there so that on February 1st, whenever the magazine comes out, it's all there.
It's right there.
And let's leave our room for error.
Right.
So what are you saying, Brian, January 7th, maybe, on the bottom of this form?
Just-
I'm willing to
pick a
let
date.
you decide,
Pick a date.
figure out your calendar, and then come back to us.
Pick a date.
I'm asking that they just come back to the board with an email saying these are the dates they've solved on that works fine, and they coordinate with JR and the magazine, so to make sure that everything works.
Yeah, and I believe that this issue was brought up because there was a homeowner that had a question about the questions that you're asking the candidates. So we wanted to make sure you saw the 3 questions that the candidates were being asked and see if the board had any feedback or input on this.
I have a couple of items. First, as a non-retired person, I would prefer that the designation of retired yes or no be removed. It's not relevant. I mean, you might as well say, planning to request membership for the Nobel Peace Prize. It's really not relevant.
It's
And
discriminatory.
it's a lot of things. So I don't think you need that, first of all. The second thing is that I recognize that in the charter changes, we are discussing the ability to sit on multiple governing boards of the community at once. While we can't say on here, you cannot be a member of CBD or CROA and CROA, I do think we could ask the question, are you currently a member of any governing body in Celebration? And I think that's an important piece of information that would be relevant for the candidacy.
Not that it would disqualify them from running, just to know.
Well, we can't disqualify them, at least as I understand the charter right now.
Well, it might also be a change in the have you ever served on any other, or to have you ever, or do you currently sit on?
Well, I would like to actually have something that specifically says I am currently a member of, because I'm not sure that people are aware if a candidate is currently sitting on another board. I would like it to be distinguishable and noticeable that they are doing that.
In celebration, a
In
celebration.
celebration, yeah. I mean, if you're on the Boys and Girls Club, great, but that's not a governing, sorry, Mike, I wasn't actually talking about it. But if you are sitting as a member of CJC or CDD or the Enterprise Development District or the Water and Sewer Board or the County Commission in Osceola County, we should know that.
CJC,
So you want to add
already on it.
community and county?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's legit.
County's relevant, I think, also.
Okay. So I have the additional question about serving on an active board or committee in celebration on Osceola County, and to list those so that it's made aware of what those are, and then remove the question about retirement.
That would be my suggestion.
Can you just combine the first two questions? Do we have to have them separate for any reason? Can't we just list them?
Well, I think 1 and 2 are different things. I think you could make one
No,
be,
but why do we have to separate?
I think 1 could be, are you currently serving on any blah, 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 and 2 could be, have you historically? Because historical is
Historical's
good
it for-
relevance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the narrative is separate from the 3 questions,
Yes.
just to be clear.
Okay.
Is there a word limit on that, Steve, on the brief description?
225.
No,
I mean,
but the
that's-
brief
are
description.
we
that's a good
keeping
point.
that?
That's a good
Enforce
point.
that.
There's some people,
I
I think,
have
that
seen
go
some
beyond that.
that use that with hundreds of words.
Yeah.
I have seen that.
Yeah.
Are they gonna hold them to that, or should
Well,
we
I think
expand it?
what we've done in the past is if it's just a couple words off and everybody had the opportunity to do that, we've made it fair.
No,
and
it's the limits on these words.
Right.
Someone could put 500 words, so what prompted you to declare?
Then you get somebody
So set the
complaining
limit
that
for all
somebody got
questions.
500 words, and then somebody else, when they.
The limit is
225.
inclusive of your narrative plus each of the 3? I mean, just be clear what that is.
Just tell them their answers have got to fit on this page. Because you put this in with the materials that go out along with their 225, if I
This
remember
is
right.
the actual one you're doing? This is the actual one?
Yes,
That's what we did last year.
In the space
This year.
provided, you're talking about in the space provided. So you're talking about 4 lines for
Right,
each
that's
question.
not
Because you got the 225.
Yeah,
I mean,
225 is separate from that.
yeah, I understand.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
where you put most of the marketing.
So what are you gonna do if you get 500 words submitted? What are we gonna do?
Yeah, there are some that
I'll have to
want
ask them to
carry over.
reduce
Go
it.
back and ask
Just
them to
say in-
reduce it.
Just say in the
Because
space
some are
provided.
really lengthy, I know.
In the space provided.
Before. Yeah.
Are there any?
No, I mean, I
oth-
think a word limit's good, you're right. I mean, space provided is, they could change the font. I mean, I think he's
Did you-
looking at some type of, because some have been extensively over.
In 11
Well, you gotta think of
point
what's gonna fit, make, in the newspaper look right.
We'll just set a limit for each question and make it consistent.
Yeah, 100 words,
I think it's
or
fair.
50 words, 50, whatever. Okay. Anything else under co-election standards? Are there any procedures we need to set up? There were concerns last year on some issues.
Yeah.
Well, I would just like to remind everyone that the First Amendment is apparently still alive in celebration. You are still allowed to canvass, to door knock, to put up signs, to do mailers within the normal boundaries. And that attempts to stifle that are unacceptable.
You just can't put door hangers on doors.
I get that, but you can knock on doors, and you can leave mailers under the doormats, and, you know, as long as you're not hanging a door hanger, right?
I do have one thing. Is it appropriate for a candidate to solicit votes in a CROA? How do we want to do with CROA assets? So the dog park, town hall, places like that.
You mean to hang out at the dog
Is
park
that
or hang out in
appropriate for
Lakeside?
a candidate? I mean, I don't know the best way to go about that. It's definitely a touchy subject.
I think you have to allow people, I mean,
You
I
go
cer-
anywhere,
I
but-
w- I mean, I went last year and handed out business cards and pins.
No, I think the question was that there was some discussion of someone standing next to a ballot box,
Things like
being
that.
next to a ballot box and soliciting votes.
In town hall,
Right next
I,
to the
in
ballot.
I think in
town
town hall.
hall, I don't think we should
I
allow
don't think
it.
we should allow it,
But
'cause
other
that's right,
than that, I
public
mean, if
place.
somebody wants to go to Posh Pooch We'll let them do it.
There we go.
We invite the candidates to Food Truck Fridays and those types of things.
Yeah, and we actually
Because
set
everywhere
that up.
you're at, you're on CROA property. anyway.
Yeah, I would like to see some sort of a election commission board, a small nimble group that is not involved in the election, that serves to help mediate and integrate candidates into the process. Susan and I talked about this recently. It is difficult to get up to speed on all the things that are going on. Those of us who've been through Steve's lecture, his PowerPoint, were enthralled and overwhelmed and mystified. It's not enough, and it's too much at the same time. It would be really helpful to have some opportunity for all candidates for CROA to begin to come alongside and do some of the board briefings of the public records, the things that are available to the public generally, to become engaged and involved in the process for a rolling start. And I would like to see some small group begin to think about that process of how do you integrate new board members and how do you make sure that the elections are run fairly. There were controversies last year, and I don't think those controversies should be things that have to get resolved by making a phone call to Steve or Susan and then asking them to make an individual decision. I don't think that's fair to them. I don't think it's fair to the process. So I'd like to see that become a more, and I think we're also trying to model for other parts of the community that are having elections how we want to do this. I think that's the next logical step.
Anything else on this? So you'll send a revised version out?
Yes.
Okay. Shall we move to Parks and Recreation Master Plan?
Certainly.
And this is really more about the process.
Right. Go to the next page. Okay, Steve and I actually had 4 meetings, and they were good. I'm gonna do the first slide and let him do the other sides, and I'll just interrupt him constantly. One of the reasons I wanted to do the first slide, though, is it became very clear to me in these meetings, all 4 companies had Florida experience, all 4 companies could do the thing and were selected by Steve for reasons which he'll go over. But it was very clear to me in these meetings that Steve is an asset. They knew Steve, quite a few of them have worked with Steve before or seen him in different projects before where he was at before and stuff like that. And my point with this first slide is really to say that I think we have an asset with Steve on this particular type of a project that you might not have on other types of projects. I mean, I truly am doing this lead-in to say that we shouldn't say, oh, this is CCMC or this is Steve, it's his role. Steve has actually got professional certification in this area, is an asset, and I think we should use him. As we go through here, what I ended up talking about with Steve is I'd like to use him and I'd like to use other CCMC assets to help save us money. I think they have professional expertise anyway. We went through the process in 10. Steve went through the process in 15. I think it's important that we divorce this from CCMC so we avoid any of the political nonsense that always seems to happen. But on the other hand, I want to use Steve and CCMC employees underneath Steve a lot because I think they're really, it was perfectly, you know how you can sit in a meeting and say, oh crap, this person actually knows what they're doing. You know, on this one here, I mean, I was getting educated, which was nice, but we have an asset here, so let's be very open-minded and realize we got an asset, and that's a good thing. With that, go to page 2, Steve.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, just to be clear, you're not suggesting that Steve do this absent these other?
No. I certainly want and recommend that we go with a third party, because there's,
Okay.
Steve's gonna get into issues like statistically valid surveys and stuff like that, which I think would be very good for reasons we'll talk about. But I think it would be wise for us to use Steve and CCMC assets to help complement whoever we choose.
Okay, thank you, Brian. With that said, when it came to identifying and determining which planning company we should utilize, my main focus during the Florida Recreation Parks Association annual state conference this year at the end of August was to work the expo hall and throughout the networking opportunities at conference to talk to these planners that were available. And these are the four that I spoke with quite extensively on what kind of information we currently have and what we're looking to do moving forward. When it comes to AECOM, I was the project manager for the Seminole County Parks and Recreation Master Plan, Comprehensive Master Plan in 2013, and we worked directly with AECOM, was the company, the provider of that master plan. They do a lot of business throughout Florida. David Barth is a PhD and he has all kinds of certifications, very well known in the planning industry. He actually worked for AECOM in 2013 when I was running the project for Seminole County, and he was our project lead in Seminole County, so I'm very familiar with Mr. Barth and his working. He has since started his own company, went back to school, got his PhD, and started his own company. Community Solutions Group is Christian Caborn is the lead for that. She's a certified Parks and Recreation executive. She's also been director of park systems plannings in the past. She was the director of St. Cloud Parks and Recreation, so a local recreation department, but she's transitioned over the last 10 years into more parks planning. So Community Solutions Group is a well-known, viable planner. And then the last one was Los Design, and they were a fairly new company, but Whit Alexander was at conference this year, and I had an opportunity to talk to him about what we were working with and what we were trying to accomplish. So those are the four groups that we interviewed.
Before you leave this phase, all right, the accreditations that you have, what are those initials standing for?
They're Association of Landscape Architects. There are CPRP is Certified Parks and Recreation Professional. You have
What's RLA?
yeah, I have to look at that's a registered landscape architect, I believe. They're all different levels of landscape architecture or certified planners. So that's what all these folks that do planning, they have a background in that. Okay, so the scope of the project, what we looked at, in the fundamentals of the scope, this is where my serving for the National Recreation Parks Association and going to different municipalities and entities throughout the United States to review their files. This served us well in knowing what the fundamentals are for a Parks Master Plan and understanding what we did in 2015 and not recreating the wheel, but enhancing what we already have and utilizing the information that's already there. So we thought it was important to look at a facility needs assessment, look at demographic analysis, look at master plan promotion in coordination with the CROA board, so understanding once it's completed what the promotion, what this looks like. And then part of our needs assessment would be community interviews, focus group meetings, and public workshops. And then the most important part that we believe when it comes to the needs assessment is a statistically valid mail or telephone survey. And the reason why this is most important is this is how you get the entire community's voice heard on what the needs are of the community. This removes the opportunity for one vocal group to just show up at every meeting, monopolize that time, and have what they're looking for become the top priority. So this is an opportunity where you're gathering information from multiple different places. Statistically valid survey will give you some standalone data to see what a good sample size or a good portion of this multi-generational community looks like. Now there'll also be opportunities then for a public or an open survey where everybody will have the opportunity to answer those questions, and then they'll be weighted.
If I can jump in here. It was interesting listening to the statistical valid type approach, because basically they do a lot of very good demographic work. They figure out how to send mailers, surveys to everybody, but certain of them have a code which gives you a lot of statistical validity, whether people are married, single, kids, old, young, all that kind of stuff. The people who are getting that will not know they're getting it. We won't know they're getting it. So you'll have a statistically valid group at 96% or higher, and then you'll have everybody else, which gives you more confirming type information on top of that. This wasn't done before, and then we as a board can sit here and say, okay, here is the statistically valid feedback, here's the rest of the feedback, because you could have somebody say, you know, we're going to get 200 people together because we want to create a voting pattern for this. Well, that will not work with a statistically valid thing. but it will give you additional information. So that way we've got statistical information and additional information.
So with this statistically valid survey, a couple of questions. One is, how do we protect the rights of smaller populations? And I'm thinking about specifically a population like Artisan Park or the pickleball players who don't represent a majority of residents in the community, but have a particularized need. In other words, is this a majority vote? You know, we take a vote. I mean, part of the problem with surveys up to this point has been that they've been viewed by the community as we're voting to do something. I obviously understand that this survey is designed to give us information to create the plan, but I also want to make sure that this survey doesn't ignore that there are pockets of individualized needs that have to be responded to and reflected, even if they are not for every resident of the community.
Let me give the, I just learned this answer question first, and then he can give you the right answer.
Okay.
The statistical valid survey is going to be broad enough and across enough of populations based upon demographics, geography, and stuff like that, that you should get a very representative across the board answer. But we're going to give lots of other people opportunity to provide input. So you may find out that on a statistically valid basis, 8% of the population say pickleball courts should be rated number 1. You may find out when we get the rest of the population that there are 200 or 300 people who say, I want a pickleball court. Okay, we've got one answer statistically valid, and we've got obviously a whole people who expressed great interest because they went to the problem of singling it out. At the end of the day, we as a board are not going to take the statistically valid survey or the other survey and say, here's the answer. I think you gotta take both skews and say, here's probably a statistically valid truth, and by the way, we got these 300 people who sure as hell want this, and then how do we weigh the two components as we make decisions about where, because at the end of the day, this survey is going to give us information, and we as a board have still got to make decisions.
That would have been the only thing I would add to that, is that last sentence that Brian just said, is that ultimately throughout the stakeholder meetings, the public workshops, the focus group meetings, all these groups are going to have an opportunity to have their voice heard, but you all are going to be presented from this company that we select. They'll take it, they'll organize it, they'll give you some industry standards, what things look like, but you are the final stakeholders to decide. They'll give you some prioritizations based on what they're seeing the data showing and pointing to, but at the end of the day, you guys are the final stakeholders when it decides how you're going to spend your capital dollars.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense to me. I think it's really important from the outset that we make abundantly clear that this is not a popular vote. We are not polling to find a winner. We are not, we are not asking people to turn out the vote or get out the vote. I'm thinking, in general election terms. We are not taking the survey as the replacement for our good judgment and our fiduciary responsibility to the community as a whole. I think if those expectations are laid out from the beginning, if they are clearly articulated, that this is a piece of information that we need that helps us put together the plan, but we are not conceding or giving up our right to decide just based on what's in this poll.
And wait till later, because what you're going to find out is while all this is being done without CROA involvement, CROA has got a heavy communication involvement that's going to be going on during this process.
Right, and I would say, I think that on the flip side of your statement, Jackson, we want to make sure that 6 months from now, a year from now, a group doesn't come back and say, well, I didn't know about that. I didn't get to have my voice heard, because that's pretty typical when you do needs assessments for communities. Someone will come back and say, well, nobody asked me my opinion on it. So we want to make sure we do a campaign that really gets people excited about talking about what their needs are for this community.
In your reviews of these companies, did you have an opportunity to ask them or get a list of past projects that they've actually done? Because we don't have that here.
Yes. We do, and I'll give you this proposal, so as we get to the end of this presentation, you'll see Brian and I, our methodology on presenting this to you, and then next steps.
We're not giving you all the proposals, we're giving you the one proposal for the company we chose, and we'll explain why. It talks about every one of them had Florida experience, every one of them has national experience. There is, I think they were all very reputable, but we'll be able to show you that.
So a couple questions. You use the term statistically valid. What does that mean?
They will do sampling based on villages, based on demographics, based on family size, those types of things, and then they'll select, I believe it's around 5,000 different homes statistically selected throughout the community.
5,000 homes and we have 4,000?
No, it wasn't.
No, I'm sorry, not 5,000 homes. Yeah.
500?
No, it's in here, it's in the numbers.
Oh, okay.
5,000 is a number that is tied to something completely different.
So how is that information already coded?
I'm
How do
sorry?
we know that we have family homes?
There are databases that they can purchase that allows them to see the demographics and to validly pick the different houses that will be selected for that. But it will be a random selection. So you
it's-
can't come and say, I want my house to be selected. It'll be a random selection. by
So
the-
then that does not allow for 100% participation.
Not from the statistically valid portion, it doesn't.
Okay, but I said that before. The statistical valid, we don't want 100% population. We want a statistically valid sample, but we're going to seek 100% feedback because you'll be provided statistically valid feedback and the rest of the feedback because they may present the board with two different pieces of information which helps the board make decisions. Because at the end of the day, what you're going to get back is you're going to get back information that helps you to put together a Parks and Rec master plan, based upon both sets of feedback.
But you're gonna see what the online survey said, you're gonna see what the statistically valid survey said, you're gonna see what the stakeholder meeting said, you're gonna see what the public workshop said. All that information will be utilized for this company then to put together some prioritization based on industry standards and
Yeah,
best practices.
you were talking like about 95% response rate, which is virtually impossible.
I said 95% statistical validity.
Oh, so it's statistical validity. Okay, that's different than response rate.
Okay.
Okay,
So then the other piece is, and I want to see how these deal with this. All the background that I've seen so far is about recreation. We have as a major element a community center, which is not necessarily recreation. So I'd like to see prior experience dealing with that as a potential Parks and Recreation master plan.
I would say that in most municipalities, community center falls underneath their recreation plan.
Every single one of these dealt with recreation.
They may call them recreation centers.
Whatever you want to call it,
Opposed to
every one of them
community
dealt
center.
with it. They, some of them, even ACON, we'll talk about it later, but even builds them and stuff like that. So that is encompassed in every one of these.
Yeah, as long as a community center encompasses much, much more than recreation.
No, it does.
Okay, good.
But you have to understand recreation is a wide term to include enrichment programming, athletics. It includes pretty much theater, anything that we could think of nowadays falls underneath recreation for municipalities.
It was perfectly clear from these conversations that recreation could include a movie theater.
Okay.
It certainly
Okay.
included a concert hall. It included
Arts.
walking parks. It included all kinds of stuff. So if you do it for recreation, that's what they're considering
Correct.
recreation.
Just a question. So are we talking, Gary Hespeth, are we talking about a facilities master plan or just parks and recreations?
This is
We
gonna
have
be.
two different things
yeah.
already in the book.
This is gonna be geared more towards facilities. What do you need to build next?
Right,
We-
so that is a
That's
better
the point that I'm-
discussion,
yeah.
covers the whole community. So at the beginning of your slide, I just thought we were talking about parks and recreation. I would appreciate it if you just call it facilities master plan.
geared
Which
more towards
includes-
the
Under umbrella.
facilities master
Which includes pickleball and
Correct.
swimming pools and
Right.
everything, yeah. That's the point I'm.
For purposes to give you a little bit better background, Steve had already provided the old
Right.
Parks and Recs master plan, was concluded, all the stuff like the community center and stuff like that. Happy to change the name to whatever will work best in the community for helping people to understand what
That's
we're talking
exactly.
about. But they'd read it, Steve went over the GIS surveys, he showed them past demographics and stuff like that, they know they need to update all that. It was perfectly clear to me that the process that Steve is laying out here is not new. This is something that they all do. It is a standard process. The difference between all four companies is subtleties, and we're not reinventing a wheel here. We've talked about this planning process that we're gonna start on December 3rd and how we may be cutting new ground. We're not cutting new ground here. We are updating a process that is very standard in the industry. Fair statement?
Correct, and that's the industry standards that I use to take the information that this community already had in place from 2010, 2013 to compile your original master plan.
Who did the plan on 2010? Who led that?
Jeffrey Mowen, the survey took place in 2010. That was a survey committee, I believe, that was appointed by the board. Jeffrey Mowen led what I would consider more of the stakeholder meeting. That was in 2013.
Yeah. Do you remember who was on the committee?
I don't have those names.
So it's safe to say we're taking a slightly different approach here by going outside, systematizing it, using professionals who come in, review, recommend, and then bring back to us, rather than what has historically been a more informal process.
There's absolutely no doubt that that is what we want to do.
Yeah.
Because at the end, I mean, I don't want to rehash newspaper magazine, but we all now know that 300 votes can be galvanized for anything. And we want to avoid, I don't care if 300 votes are galvanized in this, as long as they're not galvanized inside the statistical ballot survey. I'd like to be able to sit here and say, he talked about it earlier, you can have 3 or 4 different processes, we can see the results of all 4, and we can have great conversations and make educated decisions based upon the results of all 4 as to what that says about the community.
And I think that's a critical point. To me, what's important is you have multi-methodology.
Yes.
Multi-methodology.
Right. So
and some may be repeated, meaning you start with something, you get new data, and then you go back.
Right.
So you do maybe focus groups, then you have some data, then you redo focus groups.
Right.
So it's not just 4 pieces that come together.
And because we're doing this
It's interactive.
because we're doing this once, and we're doing it every 5 years or so, I mean,
Right.
we'll have to do it when Island Village is done,
Yeah.
2023 or whatever.
Yeah.
You want to do it right, because
Yeah.
none of us are going to be around when some of the boards are discussing this in 2022 or 23 or something like that. So you want people to reference back the way Gary does all the time to a prior study and the different solutions and why it made sense. And I am certain we'll update it once Island Village is done about, okay, how does that change the dynamics of what we got to think about?
Right.
So what do we do at this point? What do we do?
We're not there yet.
Yep.
We're going to tell you.
I've already read through it. I've already seen it.
You know, I thought we could just.
I'm trying to get out of here.
All right.
Wait,
I think
Brian-
Debbie has a question.
Yeah, just real quick, since Brian brought up Island Village, and that's going to be built before this is redone, are we incorporating any suggestions for them, or any thoughts?
I think we can certainly have that conversation. I know that I have talked with Bennett a little bit about facilities options for putting, whether that be a building down there or pools or whatever that is,
Right.
at least have that voice heard as part of this overall conversation.
My answer would be no. Bennett has told me that he likes birds that fly, he likes birds that walks, he likes elephants, that doesn't
I'm
tell
not
me.
taking your word.
That doesn't tell me a damn thing.
Well,
So we're gonna have
Out the
this
window.
done before they get phase 1 through TCC.
Right,
So
right.
we need to have the best information we have, see where the heck they ended up 4 years from now, and then we incorporate.
But it doesn't mean that they can't come back and supplement or add to your overall facilities master plan. If you say that it's important that we have a pool of this size and this location, and they build a pool, then that's, to me, a win on your facilities master plan.
And we've had that conversation, and Bennett just came back and said, well, I'll consider that, but I may want to do something else, and I have bosses.
Right.
So at the end of the day,
Yeah, it's
I
hard to.
really don't care about
It's hard to
Matthew
count
Holmes at
on it
all.
as part of your master
You
plan
just
at this point.
you won't get any sympathy from me.
Yeah.
Okay, just so you understand when you see the quotes, we understand that typically a comprehensive master plan costs usually around $100,000. So we are looking at about a quarter of that. Primary significance here for what we're trying to do, we just spent a lot of time talking about that, the statistically valid. Secondary is more the demographic analysis, the promotion, which will be strong through JR and his team, and then working as project schedules for estimates for the projects. And then once we get the final vision, implementation strategy and report, that final product, then we'll get that promoted out to the community.
You see the names at the bottom of that slide. That is the team that Steve is talking about, dedicating heavily to this project.
But I'll be the project lead from the management staff team, and I'll allocate the resources accordingly. And here's our cost proposals. AECOM's at 29.5, Lowe's was at 32, Barth was at 37, and Community Solutions Group was at 38.5.
We have a couple of quick questions. I see we're
Please.
bouncing around. First of all, could you tell us who Corinne Harris is?
She's our new Parks and Lifestyles Coordinator. She took over for Nikki when Nikki was promoted into Amber's position.
You're on CCSC.
We'll have to meet her. Nothing at all.
Anything else?
Debbie, did you have a question?
through the cost proposals. So recommendations and thoughts, the work that needs to be done, well defined. We do have the previous data, and they, all groups that we talked to said that it was clearly relevant to what we're trying to accomplish. It sets a strong benchmark for us. Will enhance the old plan, not replace it. We received these 4 proposals. They're pretty much all read the same. It's really not surprising. This is just the fundamental steps of doing master planning. All of them are qualified. All of them work here in Florida. I think you would do well with any of these companies. But our recommendation becomes one of more soft points and what we think is maybe a better fit and feel. So here's the recommendations. AECOM, while we wrote all these things, had their great corporation, lots of resources, but their bid did not include a statistically valid survey as requested, and we were pretty clear to them that that was what we felt was most important. They had it as an add-on, so it's not part of their overall cost of $29,000. LOS was our recommendation. Please.
Going back to AECOM, we don't recommend them. And I used to work for the Zurich Group for 20 years, and Zurich would decide they were going to roll out a global mandate, and they were so big and so they were so big and so efficient that 2 years later they'll have communicated like how much they want to change pricing within 2 years. I came away with the feeling that AECOM, very big, very good, but there's a lot of huge corporation risk, I think.
Yeah. And for LOS, I'm going to pass out their ultimate proposal. This is our recommendation. We'd like for the board to review this. They are an Atlanta-based firm. They've done significant work in Florida. They're trying to grow their Florida presence. They do have some professionals here on site in Florida. Their bid was competitive, and ultimately we were impressed with how they discussed their statistically valid survey and how they go about it, which is defined more in their proposal that you can look at. David Barth, very well known and respected. It's going to be very data oriented, and it's a little bit higher cost, but he would be our number 2 if LOS isn't the one that we end up choosing. And the Community Solutions Group was the highest bidder. We just thought that we had better quotes from some good firms, so we kind of put them on the secondary. But again, these are 4 very qualified firms, and we did interview all of them, hour and a half each. So
telephone, Skype?
They were all in person.
All in person, okay.
And then for our approach, we would like to get some consensus here. Does the full board have the desire to meet with LOS? But do we want to get it on the November 14th agenda so that we can stay with our timeline? That would give us a kickoff in December to begin educating the community. And then it's about an 8-week time frame to do the needs assessment. So the statistically valid survey, the interviews, group meetings, public workshops, and online survey would all take place in January, February. And then the final updates to the master plan and review is about a 4-week process in March. Final product delivered to the CROA board in early April.
So here was the thought process. We've got this queued up. There's no value in wasting time, in my opinion. We've had requests for pickleball courts. We've had requests for artisan park stuff. We've had requests for other things. We've kind of been conveniently saying, give us a little time. So, you know, we wanted to get the budget approved. We did that on October 29th. Today's November 5th. LOS was Steve and my first choice before we saw the bids, and then ignoring AECOM, which didn't have the valid survey, they were the lowest bid. So we would have chosen them before we saw the numbers. When we saw the numbers, we said, well, this is even better than we thought. I think we're probably getting a benefit. They're trying to continue to enhance and grow their Florida presence, so sometimes it's good to just be the right person at the right time. I would personally like to get this launched quickly because I just don't want to waste any more time. What we would need to do is if you would like to meet with them as a board, we've got the package here. If you think it's important, great, we will. If you don't think it's important, then maybe we invite him down for the board meeting on the 14th if we think that's going to happen. We spend a little time during that day or even that evening, but then we start really launching into a kickoff. Where we are going to have to, as a board, spend our time is we need to educate the community. I mean, Jackson had a good point earlier. I think we would need to hit the Friday Flash. I think we would need to hit the magazine. I think we need all these different things so that people understand we're doing this. This is why we're doing it. It gives us a time frame of April 1st, which seems very reasonable. New board comes on March 6th, 7th, or something like that. We all know it takes a new board 3 weeks to find the bathroom. You know, but at least then we're sitting around, and in April, we start having intelligent conversations about how to spend assets on some of the different things that were being requested of us right now, and get a product out to the community about how, okay, this is how we as a board want to move forward.
Personally, I don't think there's any need to meet as a board. I would trust this recommendation. Once the consultant has been hired, if it's advantageous for us to meet with that individual or a representative of that company to help answer questions for them or shape the information, I think that's fine. It strikes me that there's nothing particularly unusual about the process or what we're doing. This is not breaking new ground in any sense. And, you know, and I'd like to move forward expeditiously, remembering that when I come back to you saying we want to do the CCMC management survey and the request for a sustainability study, that we would have the same sense of urgency there. But I'm happy with not bringing this through more steps.
I mean, that's why we appoint board members to bring back recommendations, and I think based on this report, I mean, I'm happy with what I've heard.
It is important that you all understand that we're going to tell Steve and some of the people working for him, okay, this takes a chunk of your time for a while.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think once a new board gets here, they're going to be educated, they're going to talk about what their priorities are, so this allows Steve, Susan, because Steve's running this project, Susan's going to run other things, but at the end of the day, he starts marching orders for CCMC that this is a very high priority. We have the other meeting on December 3rd. I'd like to hear their timeline and stuff like that, so we talk about how that prioritizes into it versus this. But, you know, this becomes a heavy January, February, since that's when we're going to be voting for new board members, and a lot of people are going to be paying attention to CROA things anyway. I think it's a natural time to do surveys, town halls, or voter
Brian,
forums
what
and
was
all
our
that
budget
stuff.
on this? I forgot the budget number.
I think we had 25.
We had 25 in the budget, this would be 32.
So we pulled it out of the budget, the operating budget though, and we were gonna use the capital dollars for this, so we didn't have a defined what we needed to spend. But let me just add to Jackson's comment, just because I'll be the project lead for this and I'll be working directly with the contractor, you all will have your voices heard through stakeholder meetings and those types of things. So you won't be isolated from this process.
Jack?
I echo what Jackson's saying, but I think the immediacy is that this is a 5-month project according to this thing here. I'd like to see it a little bit faster.
I think this is a reasonable time frame for making sure we get the data back that you're gonna need to make decisions on prioritization.
Well,
I mean, done in December.
That is actually, Jack, the reason that it's April 1st was there, is because you got Thanksgiving and you got Christmas, and they struggled, all 4 of them struggled with what you can effectively do in that time period, and you spend a lot of time getting organized so that you really launch this in very early January because of the
I
holidays.
understand what you're saying, but this is a critical thing for us, and we said we need to get it done immediately, because we have pending decisions. I mean, Stetson, among other things, was one of the ones that you said, well, we'll put off to make a decision, and whether you go for that or not, I'd like to see it as expeditious as possible.
I'm perfectly happy, and I think Steve is too, to say, if we approve this on the 14th, we ask Los to have the representatives here, maybe some of us even meet with them earlier on the 14th, and we talk about how do we launch as fast and effectively as possible.
So I definitely follow everybody with this, and as you guys were going through, I was actually doing my own little research, and the 2 I start off are coincidentally your 1 and 2. So I'm definitely impressed with this firm here. They've done a lot of recreation centers, community centers, whatever the case is, as you know. One thing I really liked is Heather on there, if she is going to be working with us. She was a town planner for many, many years.
I believe she's our project lead.
And she would be our project lead. And she, I mean, I looked up a couple of the communities that she was over in her town planner position. And I mean, they really look very similar to us between their events, their parks and rec. So I'm definitely impressed. I'd like to see if we can get it, obviously we all would, as quick as possible. We are going to take the original one into account in some fashion. And last thing I wanted to see, 2 things rather. Can we, this is a Parks and Rec kind of an expense, is there any way to use that budget towards Park and Rec for the
We're actually going to use
expense?
working capital.
Working capital.
Just because I'm looking at, again, whole picture, you look at the apartments they're going to use the future Parks and Rec, are we able to get them to chip into the expense?
But they're
to
chipping
increase
into
the
the working
revenues?
capital fund.
That's
Through the
all
Department
that?
of
Okay,
Elections,
perfect. And then my final thing was, can we tie this into the postcard in any capacity with the candidate, you know, get the information out there?
I think that's a great thought, that I want to have that
exercise.
conversation with Lois, because I think that now's the time to promote. If you want your voice heard in this community, if you're never going to do anything else the rest of the year, come show up now, because it's election time, it's facilities master plan time.
I both want to hear what the residents say, but I also don't want to hear down the road that we never asked.
Right.
So I'd rather just put it everywhere.
So a couple of thoughts. I agree with that. I don't have a need to meet with them prior to making a decision. I think, trust that process. As one who has done hundreds of surveys, I see a lot of emphasis here on survey. And I would rather emphasize, while I want to see a solid survey or surveys, I would like to see more emphasis on the process of engagement, of community groups, of focus groups, of discussions, of dialogue. So not, I mean, it just feels like, not having read the proposal yet, overemphasis, it feels like 75% of it's about survey, which I think is not formed well. But that's what it feels like from what I'm hearing. And my bias is, not my bias.
We had a lot of conversation with all four of them, and what you end up with in all kinds of situations is squeaky wheel, or those who have time can do it, but those mothers with 2 children, people with kids at school age that have after school sports and stuff like that, you know, young singles and stuff like that never get represented well in community type forums because they don't have the time and they don't show up. And that's what we were trying to avoid.
Well, your job as the ultimate stakeholders, when you make your final vote on how you're going to spend those guaranteed capital dollars that you have coming in, you have to determine how you're going to weigh the data that you're getting back in. So that responsibility is still going to lie with you guys as the final stakeholders for picking. So you have to say, does the community focus group that we had, does that weigh more to me on how I want to prioritize, or does the statistically valid survey weigh more for me? And we have to figure out, again, based on industry best practice and standards, they're going to come back and they're going to give their recommendations. But ultimately, this is the final stakeholder group that gets to make that decision.
So I'll look at the report and see how that weighs out.
Yeah, David, I would say, just quickly looking here, there's a public meeting, then 2 days of focus groups before they ever get to the survey. So.
And then we'll want to have the same after any survey.
And I actually, now I'm looking at this, they did South Walton County, Florida, which is where I was. I remember that process, and I was impressed with what they did. That's a very similar stakeholder group. That's watercolor, seaside. That is very much planned new urban communities. So I'm guessing that they have some sensitivity to type A personalities who are used to getting their way.
Okay. So the other piece, and again, not having looked at this, is to specify what we would want the final report to look like. So we're very, very clear with what we want that report to look like. And then actually the last piece is going back to Jack's point. I would like to see a final product delivered to this board. This board is intact. To ask for a final product to be delivered to a new board, like on the 3rd week of a new board, I think is late. I would like to see that with this board, so I would say early March or March 1st, just to have it delivered. And then and then it'll be actionable after that.
Okay, but
I know, I mean,
no. We've had this conversation, and here is the problem we ran into with people. If you have town hall, focus groups, whatever it is, in December, you run into Christmas. You run into the foundation has its thing where, here in town hall and stuff like that. You get very poor attendance, especially since you get a lot of people with Christmas parties, young kid parties, et cetera, et cetera. There was a feeling that if we literally launched this thing probably during the 1st week of January, that you at least in the new year capture a lot of people who are starting to go back to work, starting to do these things and everything, and do it. I would love to have it by March 1st. Clearly, we talked about that. We got pushback about, these things never go perfect. They all then also talked heavily about, it also depends about how active the board is in helping canvass and get people out and do things like that. They will get better answers if they have a meeting in Artisan Park, if they have a meeting in Georgetown, if they have a meeting here. You know, you don't get people to come to 500 people meetings, you get 50 people meetings, but you know, it's how organized we can be.
Right.
But I think all we can do, if we can get the board to agree, then Steve's gonna call them shortly. We're gonna try to get them in here on the 14th or 15th, whatever that date is, I think 14th.
Board meeting.
Whatever that board meeting date is. We get them in here during the day, we meet with them, and then we get ready to roll.
Well, then, to my earlier point about a small group for the election, I think this is one of the key items that any CROA candidate should not only be invited, but encouraged, strongly encouraged, to participate and attend, so that they don't get hit with what I felt like was the tsunami of information that we had this year, so that they are at least informed about what the process is and where we're going and what we're doing, so that if we don't make that, you know, earliest deadline, if we start January, February, those new board members have the opportunity to have been engaged in the process.
In the process, right. And know how to weigh different elements when they get the final report.
Well, or at least just not completely blind to it. I think that's the point.
That makes sense.
And I think a lot can happen in December. While focus groups, there may be just a few, maybe some leadership things, getting the lay of the land, the local community.
Well, they talked about doing demographics and GIS and all
Yeah,
that stuff in
and
December.
going out and looking at the parks and.
Yeah, and just
coming up with an
getting a
overall
bigger
assessment.
sense of what are some of the issues. A lot of this we've been talking about for years.
I think if I remember right, they wanted to do 5 board member interviews, which wouldn't include me. I don't think I've already talked to them, shouldn't be there, you know, so they'll talk
Yeah,
to
but
5 of you.
their interviews are gonna be
That's
more
different.
of what you think needs to be done in the community as a
No,
board member.
Yeah.
Not this, how the process
Yeah, no,
works.
5, but, so you'll have
Yeah.
input with them.
Good. Any
Thank you
further-
very much for
any-
putting this together.
This is a lot of work,
Yeah.
and this is great to get to this point.
I just want to keep reminding the board that we still have the management sustainability study, which I think needs to come alongside this work and needs to come alongside the other pieces that we're talking about from CCMC and the meeting coming up, that all 3 of these dovetail
Right.
into a more comprehensive long-term planning process. This is certainly the key piece, but I don't want to drop the ball in those other pieces and then find that we've done this plan and we have nothing else behind it.
Which has, yeah, and that, like the sustainability piece has a different agenda.
It does.
Yeah.
It does, absolutely.
So it's, any comments from the audience at this point? Mike? Anyone? Do you have anything you? Eileen does.
I hope, Eileen Barr.
Yeah, questions, yeah. Steve has the slide.
Questions,
Thank you, Steve.
Eileen Barr, 1138 Mosaic Drive. I hope you're going to also include the Parks and Rec Committee in at least some of this?
The Parks and Rec Committee, you mean the Recreation Committee?
The Recreation Committee.
Right. I think, again, everybody, all the residents are gonna have an opportunity to have their voices heard on this. I don't know that the rec committee saying they want something has any more weight than the statistically valid survey or the focus groups or any of those other, but absolutely, I think that
you
the
have every
feedback and
committee
opinions
and
are
every
important.
avenue to get.
Yeah, yeah.
I just think that, and Jackson has sat in with them, I just think they are a resource, that they're somebody that these people should talk to, simply because they're sort of boots on the ground. They're dealing with the sort of reality of where things are being done, what people are asking for, who's coming in to
The answer,
That's a good
the
point.
answer to your question could be, if they're gonna have a couple of days of focus group, then we give you an hour for a focus group.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not
Just
on-
for the
I'm-
committee.
But whoever's on.
I'm not on.
Yeah, particularly with that long-term history, having
But I
led a lot
believe
of this.
strongly in it.
Any other discussion on this?
In case there's anybody else with
Thank
an
you.
opinion.
Thank you, Eileen. Any other discussion on this item? So we're
I just
we're
have
gonna,
one more word. I've been waiting a year to say this. I'd like you all to, I'd like you all to keep in mind when going through this process to think of there's a phrase that always gets thrown out there, it makes me crazy, and that's vocal minority. I worked hard on the dog park. I was very happy to say it was the most requested amenity. Does that mean it was an amenity that was requested by a majority? Probably not. Certainly wasn't requested by 80% of people. It was probably requested by, but it was the one that people listed and whatever. A lot of things that are gonna be requested are requested by minorities, and I think you've got a good path to find out what's a legitimate minority and make a decision. But I hope I don't have to hear that phrase.
What would you like us
just
to
a
call
vocal, they're just a vocal minority, and therefore we can just.
Silent minority?
Well, let me rephrase it just a little bit. And it's not just the vocal minority. I think what happened in your last facility master plan process is when you look at the best practices on how this is done, the statistically valid survey is an important part of that. And we just didn't have that last time. So it gave more opportunity for those that could actually come to two stakeholder meetings and put a dot on the board, more opportunity for their item to rise to the top.
How about engaged stakeholders?
Yeah, I think this.
That's a great way
goes-
of engaged stakeholders.
I think this situation is more than just a master plan, but it's the entire community. It's what we've all been saying, which is engagement and
Yes.
really getting engagement on every committee.
You want to say something, Mike?
Now that you brought it up, I was going to.
Can you come to the mic, because I can't hear it on the tape,
We need to
sorry.
see
That we want to see you on
camera, too.
tape.
Sit closer to the mic from now on.
Well, people that watch it later can't hear.
Now that it's brought up, I was thinking about something, and I agree, the statistical survey obviously is an important component to this one versus the last one. It should help to smooth things to some extent if it's used appropriately. The question I had in my head, and I was reluctant to present it to you, but is there a way, or would there be a motivation to allow people to participate in one or the other? So if they were selected on the statistical survey, they then wouldn't participate in the town hall, the stakeholder input, and so on, because otherwise they're gonna get two bites at the apple.
We're trying, the
question.
conversation that was had was, they tried very, very hard to not have anybody know if they're part of the statistically valid survey. Instead, they really used demographics and the other work that they do, so that, you know, they're getting very innocent type things. And then we're clearly in the focus groups, we're gonna get biased groups. And they know we're gonna get biased groups.
Well, I think in the statistical survey, you're going to have people who have feelings about certain things, and they're gonna be biased in their own way. They're just not gonna be a
But they're not a
cohesive part of a
majority,
group.
they're not a large group. That's.
They're independently, but I think it's a way to assemble, you know, a broader opinion in the community, I think in a representative way, because you want to get to the 95% degree of accuracy. It's something to think about. I don't think you should, I wasn't going to bring it up, but I don't know if it's the right thing or the wrong thing, but I'm wondering if people should get two bites at the apple. Can we get a better result if we've got people doing it in one place or the other? And if you're selected here randomly, then, you know, you can't go put the dots on the board.
I can certainly ask them how they go
Yeah,
about that
their
approach.
experience.
I think that your jobs are gonna be easier if you see the data come back from focus groups, open survey, statistically valid survey, and it's all kind of lining up. That makes your jobs very easy, right? What makes your jobs a little bit more complicated is if every group, every method has a different result. Then you have to start deciding, how do we weigh this to show what's most important, what gets prioritized?
I don't know how you control that, Mike. How would you control
They-
that?
That's why I was.
That's what these guys know how to do.
How would you even know if somebody took two bites at the apple?
Oh,
They know.
You could do that.
No, those surveys are gonna be anonymous phone calls and knocks on the door, and then you're talking about somebody coming and putting a dot on a board. How are you gonna know?
Or the question is, how relevant is it even if they are? So even if they do get their voice said twice, does it really affect the methodology overall? And I think that this is where the experts come in and.
The bottom line is, all of this is input to the board, and the board's job is to make a judgment about what we think is best for this community.
Based on the data that you have.
Based on the various sources of information, all compiled in one report.
And then you also have to understand too, that once the plan's in place, you still have to vote on each individual item as they come up.
And
to
there
spend
may
those
be
dollars.
adjustment a year from now.
Correct.
Because of something new.
This is the way to stop this board from making decisions based on squeaky wheel.
That's right.
Because we've done that in the past, it's backfired,
That's
and it's
exactly
not
right.
representative of the community. I don't think.
All right,
Any further discussion on this?
we have our mission, we're gonna roll forward.
And we're gonna have this as an action item for,
November 14th.
which will be in our packets on
Thursday.
Thursday. And would this proposal be part of the public packet?
Yes.
Okay.
And we will try to set up a meeting on the 14th with them,
Before the meeting.
before the meeting, maybe 4:30 something.
Even though it's only gonna be an hour meeting, Jack. Just so you know.
The
was it?
The meeting's only gonna be an hour next week.
14th is gonna be 1
Just so
hour,
you
so
know.
you have to buy beer.
You have to buy
Yeah, I've heard that
Just so you
before.
know.
You know something?
Just so you know.
Yeah, when ducks fly too.
Well, ducks do fly.
Do we need,
Not the ones he eats.
are we okay with deferring the other items?
Yes, can I just make a couple of comments?
Sure, make a couple.
Really quick? Sorry, one will be my quick one, vote tomorrow. Two is, we have-
Say that a little more.
Vote tomorrow.
Slowly. Okay.
But two, Steve's review, do we have it on the calendar for a date, the review? I know we had to do the review for the eval or whatever it was. Do we have a date for that?
No.
Can we work on that?
Yep.
Perfect. And three, I just
And then
wanted to go
And
ahead.
that's gonna be an executive session?
That's fine.
So I
That
just
would
need to
have-
make sure I post it
That would
48
have to
hours
be.
in
Just so we
advance.
can keep
And that would be with the
calendar.
entire board,
What was that item, sir?
review of Steve,
My-
annual review.
So we can just knock that out and get that done.
You want me to
final
come help?
thing- Yeah, why not? Come on. Was Halloween.
Can we do that after between Thanksgiving and Christmas? Thanksgiving, Christmas, between that?
Yeah, we'll get emails going and figure out a
Okay,
date. I
we'll
just
set
don't
up a
want it to
time.
get forgotten about. My final thing was Halloween, and I don't want to stress on the negatives, but I want to actually thank you. I know that you reached out to the sheriff's office and to the county, and I will say, I think there were 17 officers in
I
town.
think 20 when I talked to them out here in the parking lot, because they staged here before they went out.
What I want to say about this is thank you. It is not our jurisdiction as CROA. However, we saw a need, we saw nobody taking responsibility for it, and we did for the safety of our community and for our residents. What I also think it did was it brought a lot of sheriffs into town, and they probably reported back how insane it is for hopeful future years that we don't have to use that soft power, if you will, and they just kind of have it on their radar. So thank you for pushing for that.
Thank you.
I have heard a lot of feedback about Halloween. I'd say it's 99% positive.
Yeah, there's only a couple little things, and it's gonna happen.
But
And
that's life.
an email's in your box right now about it.
I think we should definitely, any opportunity the residents or the board has to thank the sheriff's department, we need to
Yes.
do that, because it was simply one conversation I had, and
Exactly.
they showed up and did what they said they were gonna do. In fact, they went above and beyond. I mean, they brought in.
Can we generate a letter and copy the
It probably would be
county
very
commissioner?
nice to do that, because
I
they
mean,
brought
if we
in
can
like
get that
a.
magazine out timely, maybe a thank you in December for the sheriffs. That'd be awesome.
Can we do a formalized letter?
I think
And
a letter
perhaps
would
an
be a great
ad
idea.
in the December
Just
edition?
something.
They brought in.
Can we-
Yes, we can, but they brought in, like a cage with, sheriffs dressed
awesome.
up. I mean,
And
they
handing out
went
candy.
above and beyond.
That's community.
They sat in front of my house in the intersection with
Yeah.
blasting music for quite a while.
But I mean, that's community.
It was
and that's-
more than what we
that's
asked for, certainly.
That's what we
It was
want.
great. People loved it.
Yeah.
I think the letter would be great, and I think the ad in the magazine would be great.
And let's copy Beth Ann and the county manager and the
Yeah. Thank you.
appropriate people.
New subject. I just received an email, I'd like to read it into the record on the Comcast situation. This is from Jane Hammond, who is Xfinity Communities Account Executive in Jacksonville, to one of the terraces, or one of the condos terraces at East Village. We just received word today that we will not be able to get the cable billed in time to meet the January 1 deadline. Wanted you to let you know as soon as we did. Letters were going out to our customers to let them know that after the 1st, we will not be providing service. I'm very sorry. I was hoping we could get the job done in time. There are too many pieces involved in getting approvals, power supplies from FPL, and materials. That is the full text of the email.
Who's that from, Comcast?
It's from Comcast.
Did you send us a copy?
Yeah, I did.
So,
Look at that.
Yeah,
Just came in. Yeah.
so they're saying they're sorry, but they're gonna take everybody's TV away and too bad?
yeah.
This, you're talking about condos, you're talking about January 1st?
This is to a condo. It would, I think, apply certainly to any condo of the 11 or so that we're still trying to get service from Comcast, that we're operating and negotiating in good faith. I'm sure that this is not information that Amy Westwood had. And it probably has some implications for homeowners, single-family homeowners who have not put in their requests. I don't know, it's hard to tell from this. I think the point is that, and the reason I wanted to read it into the record here, is I want it to be very clear that Comcast is jerking us around, and it is absolutely just, well, to use a word I've used before, I'm gobsmacked.
I was waiting for it.
Actually, does it say that they're?
Very unhappy.
You read it word for word, right? It doesn't say
I
that they're
did.
not coming at all. It's saying that January 1st is not doable for them.
Said, it said,
Yeah.
after the 1st, we will not be providing service.
Right.
That's what it said.
Yeah, but further up there, it said they wouldn't be able to get.
They wouldn't be able to get in by January 1, but it doesn't say they're willing to do
Right.
anything beyond that date.
So,
And we need to explore that and find out what they might be willing to do.
Yeah,
There are a couple-
there are, so here's the situation, this is where it becomes even more complicated. There are condo associations in town that have already worked deals with Comcast that are currently having their construction and their overlay being put through the community. I think, well, I haven't read it yet, I'm just going based off of what you said, but it sounds to me like they're saying, for those of you that have not entered into an agreement with us, we can't do it by January 1st.
This was,
That's what it sounds like to me, yeah.
but this was Thursday?
To that particular,
That they can't even get it in to
Condos.
meet the deadline.
So it's unclear whether it applies to those that have
it needs
already
another
generated an
follow-up, it
agreement.
needs a follow-up conversation.
Okay,
There's a
so
follow-up.
let's agree, Steve's gonna follow up and come back to the whole board with a email, so.
What does that
and then-
mean, and for whom?
Yeah.
Did you forward me that?
I did, I have just done that.
And then I think we ought to do it like JR did his flash on the magazine. If we get information, we ought to tell Comcast we're gonna send something out. I mean, then I think we've done our responsibility.
Yeah, if they could send us a letter that they're giving the owners, we can get it out in a flash quickly.
You're talking about
The
condos.
Comcast, for the, whoever they sent it to, yeah.
Can that go out this Friday, for this Friday?
Oh, if they're, I would.
I would
I
push for it.
I'd put it in the
As
Friday
soon as
flash,
we
but I'd
possibly
send
can.
it out, I'd send out the email blast like he did with the magazine. I'd get something out there sooner, as soon as we
Because
can.
this just came in.
You have anything else? I have two.
Anyone? Okay, please.
We had said that we wanted the language for the contingency cap at this board meeting, so you're coordinating that, right?
I'm still working on that, yes.
I think that's important.
It's in the attorney's office right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Audit firm, we talked about that at the last board meeting, and you were gonna follow up on,
I sent Ron Cole of Cole and Associates an email asking him if he would consider taking us on for 2018.
and can we get out of the other one, or we don't know, or we're waiting on him first?
I'm waiting on him first.
Okay. And then we got a workshop on the 19th. I will need to call in for that, so I want to make sure that we actually coordinate that the call-in stuff's gonna work well.
Is there anybody else that needs to call in? Because if it's just Brian, it's a one person phone call.
It's 2 weeks.
But I
from
want to
to-
be able to hear and have it,
2 weeks from today.
I mean, that's just right before Thanksgiving, so.
Right.
We'll put you on the same phone that Mr.
As long as I
Slayton.
can hear what gets said under these, I'm happy.
So we have several equipment things, and then the covenants finding process. Jack, you forwarded that to us maybe 3 or 4 months ago.
And
Well, so let's just take a look at that and talk about what that process would look like, adapting that prior one from years ago.
We don't want to forget about the Celebration 25 either.
And then we want
I know
to
5 of us
follow
were
up
here.
on those, the incidents and then Celebration 25, so I'll bump those to the next one.
We want to budget a little more time next meeting.
You want to just make it till noon, formally? We're at noon now?
Is-
Let's just,
well.
let's do it, and if we're done early, we'll be done early.
Yeah.
When
You know,
when have we ever got done early? Other than the next board?
In our dreams, we're closure.
I wanted it, didn't work.
Thank you for good discussion today. Founders Weekend, Veterans Day Parade,
It's a busy week.
busy week, busy weekend, be a good time. Barbecue for all, or for those, and concerts.
Is it
Enjoy.
officially adjourned?
Motion to adjourn? Thank you. All in favor? All right.